more than a word. It's our word. That when you book an Airbnb up here, or one down there,
se ha formado la corredera, en el barrio La Cachimba se ha formado la corredera, allá
see with my own.
Okay, if everybody could, if you want, please help yourself. There's refreshments outside. And although we don't usually eat in the sanctuary, we're sort of considering this part of our social space for today's evening. We'll kind of work that way. We're setting it up this way so that people can actually see the pictures. If we were in the social hall space, we couldn't get close enough to see things, so here we are. Joining us, we have a number of people who are joined us via our Zoom, so good evening, everybody. All those who are here in person and here via our live stream, it's wonderful to be together. What we'll do this evening is really take a wander through the history and kind of experience of the Jewish community of Cuba. Full disclosure, I am not at all a Cuban history scholar, let alone a Jewish Cuban history scholar. So what I share with you is simply we're going to ask everybody who's joining us to mute. There we go. Great. Okay. But I have taken three different trips to Havana, and one actually turned out we were planning on taking our confirmation students to New York for a New York weekend, and at the time the Canadian dollar was very low, and it turned out that a weekend in New York was going to be more expensive than a week in Havana, and so we chose to take this confirmation group to Havana. This was in 2016, on the same weekend that there were two important guests in Havana. One was President Obama, but actually he wasn't the main person. The main guest was the Rolling Stones. And of course I had these teenagers with me who were begging me to take them. And when we heard that there were going to be about 1 million people at the concert, I politely declined. I had no interest in getting caught up in 1 million, Cubans and, 10 teenagers. Wasn't going to happen. So anyway, as many of you know, we are planning a trip to Cuba in March. Many of you I know are signed up. If you are interested, we are basically closed, but we can squeeze a few people in if need or want be. We're at about 25 right now, so that's really exciting and should be a great trip. We want to keep it to a reasonable number so that we can negotiate going to restaurants and different things without having to move coach buses basically. Havana is a very easy city to navigate, and it's easy to hop into taxis and that kind of thing. So we want to sort of be able to have that flexibility. So we want to keep it to a fairly small group. But if you are interested, please let me know, and we can hopefully see what we can do. So with that, I am going to I'm not going to do anything because my mouse has disappeared. There we go. Okay. So I am going to share my screen for the people who are joining us via live stream, and for those of you who are here, you'll see it on our monitor right here. In a minute. Hello. Okay. Okay, having a little technical difficulty.
While Rabbi's doing that,
Please.
I'm just going to take 1 minute to welcome you because this is our Cuba thing, but this is also our Talk Amongst Ourselves Tuesday night event,
Well, it's primarily that.
one of many. And I just want to tell you that for those of you, some of you are here for the first time for Talk Amongst Ourselves, and we do once a month now on Tuesday night, we do discussions, programs, speakers, all kinds of things. So if you like what you hear tonight, please watch our temple topics and join us for the next one. And it'll be a whole different topic altogether. But we have a really good time and it's a great program, so come back. Is that okay to give a plug?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do we have to change our currency?
Okay, so why don't we go through the program, and then I'm happy to stay and talk to people about the actual trip afterwards. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, great. So, Jewish community of Cuba, what you're seeing is downtown Havana, having really nothing to do with the Jewish community, except that the community has been in Havana really for about 200 years. Very long time. In its first, group, they came, with one of the early settlers, Spanish settlers, but it was really only in the major Jewish migrations of the late 18th, early 19th centuries that Cuba got its sort of established and larger Jewish community, primarily from Eastern European immigration, in the same way that that's where the United States and Canada and many other places got a tremendous number of Jews moving here. This is the Ellis Island story, if you will, right? So Jews fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe make their way over to places that they think are going to give them a better and more opportunities, including, of course, the United States, Canada, and Cuba. So you have a fairly large Jewish community that lives there that are Eastern European, but you also have a tremendous number of Jews who come from Sephardic backgrounds who spoke Ladino, a Spanish dialect, and who established a community there because, of course, the Cuba is a Spanish-speaking country, right? So they also established communities in Mexico and Argentina and huge Jewish communities all across the sort of Latin American world. There we go. Okay. So we don't have exact figures because, of course, Cuba does not ask people to identify their religion or anything like that. But we think that there are somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,500 Jews living on the island. About 1,100 or 1,200 of them live in Havana. So that's a huge center in terms of the percentages. And there are 3 synagogues in Havana. We'll take a look at some pictures of all 3. There's also synagogues in Santa Maria, and in one other location. I'm blanking on the name, but there are. So what's interesting is that at its height, there were probably, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000, maybe 20,000, 25,000 at some point, perhaps, Jews living in Cuba. And we'll learn as we go through the presentation what prompted that mass exodus. So we have, again, as I said, Jews arrive in Cuba in 1492 or so, along with the first explorers. They're mostly what we call Moranos, or people who are hiding the fact that they're Jewish. So we have that, that theory as well, that many people who left Spain, Portugal, and sought refuge in the New World had antecedents in Jewish life, and they really were seeking a different place to go, a refuge that they could live more freely, even if they weren't really going to live Jewishly. Even if they weren't going to live Jewishly, they wanted to live in a freer kind of experience. Then, of course, they come from different countries, as it mentions here, in the 16th, 17th centuries, from Brazil and other places, and then, of course, the larger immigrations. So the Cuban Revolution happens in what year? Yeah, great. It's 1959. It is preceded by years and years and years of turmoil, right, of political intrigues and turmoil and corruptions and all sorts of political maneuverings and all kinds of things. And Fidel Castro leads this group in a revolution in 1959. And after the revolution, of course, it's a communist revolution. So after the revolution, one of the communist kind of mainstays is to erase or to prevent religious practice. And they were taking their cues primarily from what we now know as the former Soviet Union, who also, sort of forbid or curtailed religious expression in any way possible, seeing it as your first loyalty should not be to anything else except the state. Right? And we'll talk a little bit about, how the communist system kind of works today, but just sort of hold that up. On the other hand, the Cuban community really did not experience a sense of persecution in the way that they did in Russia or some other places. They just weren't necessarily encouraged, right? So, but after the end of the Soviet era, there seemed to be an openness towards a religious expression in Cuba, including Castro creating and declaring a value to religious expression. And that kind of gave a real resurgence to religious experiences, including Judaism. In fact, Castro actually came and visited the synagogue. And they talk about that with great pride. These are two of our friends who we hopefully, if you come with, we'll hopefully be able to meet. One, her name is Idela, and the other is Helena. And Idela is this wonderful Holocaust survivor. She's in her 90s, and she is just this amazing, amazing woman who has kind of been the matriarchal leader of the Jewish community for decades and decades. And she tells these great stories. And every time I go, she offers me the best job in the world with no money. So here we have what is known as the Bet Shalom Synagogue, or the Patronado. You can see that by the architecture, this being built in the 40s or 50s, very modern, very modern building. And it was in that kind of heyday of between the end of the Second World War and 1960, right, 1959, where you had tremendous growth in the Jewish community there in Havana and Cuba in general. And that's where it really grows to be large numbers, where you hit almost 20,000, 25,000 Jews living on the island. So here is the interior. This is the main sanctuary. The sanctuary was renovated about 5 or 6 years ago. When I first went, there was a whole, the ceiling was a mess, and the floors were a disaster, and the chairs were terrible, and the windows were broken, and all of that. And they have done a tremendous job of restoring the synagogue to its former glory, literally. And it's this very beautiful space, that they can move the chairs around, even though they're pews, they can move them around, and they do, for different things. The leadership of the synagogue is completely lay-led. There are no professionals. The younger woman that you saw in the picture in the beginning, she's actually the religious school director, and she organizes stuff, and she's probably an employee, but basically there's no rabbis, there's no cantors, any of that. The people who lead the services on a regular basis are the teenagers. That's their role. That's part of their job, is to lead the services, and they have this amazing spirit and ruach that they give to the service, and it's really a fun experience. We were there actually. One of the confirmation trip that we took, we were there for Purim, and that was truly spectacular. So here you have the front of the Patronado, or the Bet Shalom, which was a very, very large building which housed a community center and a daycare and a school and all of those kinds of things. And they sort of separated off most of the building, keeping the downstairs and the synagogue, the actual sanctuary space, and basically selling off the rest of the building. You can imagine a building and a synagogue community built for a community of, let's say, 15,000 or 20,000 people, now having 1,500 or less, right? So you can imagine the scale that this was built, right? This is not a sanctuary this is a huge space, right? So it was built, okay. So this is the entrance to the Patronado from the downstairs area. This is kind of the communal areas, the social hall, and some of the other pieces, and you can see the beautiful grill work on the doors. This is a young lady who is celebrating her bat mitzvah, or preparing to celebrate her bat mitzvah, and she is completely unremarkable. But also meaning that she looks exactly like our kids, and that's the sort of beautiful part. Yeah, I mean, she could be one of our teenagers, right? Yeah. So here they have these two are working hard to do something that we've done over and over, which is, what are they making? Hamantaschen. Right. They are baking hamantaschen. So. Everything that happens at the synagogue happens with lay leadership and volunteer, including all of the meals that they prepare, all of the baked goods, everything they do together. One of the things that they provide is, Cuba has a real lack of resources. And there are many older people who are especially challenged economically. And so Bet Shalom provides Friday night dinners and other opportunities for senior citizens to come together and to provide meals and such. And so they have buses that go around and pick up the seniors on Friday evening before the service at their different locations, and then bring them to the synagogue. And then they send them home with packages and leftovers and whatever. So we have our Purim celebration. These also could be kids of ours in their Esther costumes. And of course, this is a group of kids from the synagogue planting a tree for Tu B'Shvat, exactly. New Year of the trees. Okay, what am I looking at? Medications. So one of the huge issues in Cuba is a lack of goods. So you can walk into a store and there may be 3 shelves of Pringles. That's it. You may walk into a store and have X of, whatever. But the variety is greatly lacking, and the availability of both prescription medication and over-the-counter medication is significant. So usually when we will go with luggage filled with either over-the-counter medications or prescription meds. We usually contact doctors ahead of time and say, give us your samples, and away we go. We can't do the prescription meds from here because there's an issue crossing the Canadian border with prescription medications that are not your own. So don't do that. But we can bring over-the-counter things, and you see in the picture, you've got, things like Tums and Tylenol and Advil and alcohol swabs and cough medications and vitamins and all of that kind of stuff, which is virtually impossible to get in Cuba, mainly because of the embargo that still exists between the United States and Cuba, right? So the United States prohibits any U.S. company from doing business with Cuba. So everything has to go through third-party countries. So you can, most of the stuff comes through Mexico, but it can't come as a distributor. So let's say Johnson & Johnson in Mexico can't distribute to Cuba. So Johnson & Johnson in Mexico has to sell it to somebody else. That somebody else takes it privately and sends it off to Havana. So you can imagine the cost involved. Whenever you get that third party, you're going to increase the cost of these things. So one of the things that both Bet Shalom and Agudas Israel does is they provide a free pharmacy. So they have a pharmacy that is free and open to the community. There's a pharmacist that works there, and they provide not only prescription medication, but also over-the-counter medications. You're looking at the entrance. This is a kind of an alleyway, sort of an entrance to what is known as the synagogue in the heart of downtown Havana, or Old Havana. There are the three synagogues. The Sephardic and the Ashkenazi that we looked at, they're sort of in the suburbs. And then you have right downtown, you have this, which is the Orthodox synagogue. And in the artwork there, you see the words, Ma tovu ohelecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And of course, it relates to the idea of creating a space, creating a shelter to house the community. Here is the rabbi who has been assigned from Mexico. He's Orthodox. The synagogue is Orthodox downtown. He also functions as the local shoichet, the local kosher butcher. And perhaps the moil, I don't know. And he's somebody who probably would be assigned there for a few years and then goes somewhere else. When we met him, this is 2016, 17 maybe, he said he could be there another couple years, but that by the time his kids got old enough to go to school, he wanted to be in a place that he could send them to a Jewish day school. And sadly, he said he would have to leave. But there's the interior of the synagogue. And you can see that there's traditional pews with cupboards for, each person has their own sort of permanent seat, and you have a key to the little cupboard in front of you, and you can leave your belongings there and kind of take it as you will. Okay, this is the Sephardic synagogue, the interior of the Sephardic synagogue. What you notice about both this one and the first one that we looked at, is that they're very mid-century modern in style. Right? So they're not ancient looking, they're not 18th, 19th century buildings. These are buildings built in the 40s, 50s, that kind of thing, right? As the community was growing, these are when these buildings were built. The synagogues existed prior to that, but they were in other places in more traditional, sort of older buildings that then when the synagogue community grew, they moved to these larger modern spaces. So just to give you just a streetscape, this is a very common experience, nothing really to do with the Jewish community, but just to give you a sense of what might be available. These are local merchants who are selling off of their carts. Cuba works in a dual economy, basically. It's a pure communist system, which means you are assigned a place to live and you are assigned a job. But everybody has a side hustle. So if you're a doctor, you're making $60 a month at a permanent doctor job, but then you may also work as a taxi driver, or you may work in a private clinic, or you could do something else, and that provides you with enough income to sustain your family. That look like a taxi that you've taken recently? Right? Why in the world would people be driving around? I mean, you know, many of you know that I'm a lover of classic cars, but why would people be driving around in 60-year-old, 70-year-old taxis? Well, the embargo prevented the importation of vehicles. Certainly any American vehicles were barred, and any parts availability was barred. And so the only new cars that came in were cars that were from either Russia, so you have a ton of like Lada and Yugo and some of those. You also have some Chinese vehicles that are running around. But a lot of the companies that were doing business with the United States, if you wanted to do business with the United States, you couldn't actually also be doing business with Cuba. Right? It was a pretty strict experience. So they took, you know, they've kept these cars running with kind of, you know, twine and duct tape, essentially. And basically, most of them have had their engines replaced, and they have Russian diesel engines in them, and they all sound like they're about to anytime. But it's really fun because you have all of these really fun classics to fill the streets. Yeah, I mean, they're fine. They're just not, you know, it's just funny. And you know, how many times have you been in a 1950, this is a 1953 Chevy, right? I mean, how many times have you driven in a 1953 Chevy in the last, yeah. And they have older ones. You know, this is the sort of the tail end. Yeah. So you're looking at another place called Fusterlania, which was this artist. He was a mosaic artist who started to mosaic his wall. And then he did the other wall, and the other wall, and the other wall, and then he did his neighbor's wall, and this wall, and his that wall, and then he built a gazebo, and then he built and this whole area in Havana has this whole neighborhood basically is filled with these mosaics. And it's just this spectacular kind of experience in the middle of, and so you see all these unbelievable colors in the middle of, you know, this residential neighborhood in Havana. The Cuban government, as we talked about when they started to open up and kind of promote the freedom of religion, one of the things that they did was they created this hotel in Havana. So how many people have ever been to Disney? Okay, so you can go to the Hawaiian Hotel, or you can go to the Wild West Hotel, or you can go to the, you know, whatever the theme is, right? Star Wars. This is the Cuban government's equivalent, and this is the Jewish-themed hotel. No, really. Sorry? Well, if you have about $600 a night, yes, you can stay there. It's a very chic, you know, niche hotel that caters to a very high-end clientele. This is the lobby of the hotel. It's absolutely exquisite. This was a textile manufacturing company, and what you see is actually their offices. This is their offices. This is not where they manufactured, but this is the office. And you can see the opulence of the marble columns and the golden area. You know, this is from a bygone era, right? This is just amazing. It goes up 4 stories, and they're happy to have you come and visit, and we can go up to the roof garden, which has a lovely little cafe at the top. And if you are lucky, we'll have them take us up in the oldest elevator in Cuba, which is a operator-operated, old school, what floor would you like, with the handle and the whole business. Yeah, it's a cage, you know. And it goes up 4 floors, and what you're seeing there is the stained glass roof window, which is just spectacular. And it's huge. I mean, it's a massive, massive stained glass experience. Now, what used to be the offices all around the perimeter there are now guest rooms, and each guest room is named for a Jewish figure, whether it's a biblical figure or an Israeli hero or something like that. Each of them has their own thing, including all of the artwork. So they have amazing Israeli artwork all throughout the hotel. It's really an interesting, but understand that it's nothing to do with the Jewish community. Right? It's just there, right? It's as if Disney built a Jewish-themed hotel. Yeah, but there's mezuzot on the doors. I mean, it's completely done, but it's really interesting. Okay, and here we have, just to kind of end, this is just a shot of some of the young people at the Purim celebration. So, at Purim. Okay. All right. So, what really is interesting, many parts of this, or the story are interesting in that this is a community that has, a fraction of what it did. It's gone from 20,000 to 1,500. That's a huge impact on a community. The question is, why in the world did all the Jews leave? And they all left when the revolution happened. Why did they leave?
Took their money.
Yeah, no, they absolutely took their money and left, but why? Where did they come from?
Where did the money come from?
No. Where did that community come from? Eastern Europe, right. We know about communism. Right? We know from communism, we've seen this revolution thing before, right? Right? We've lived through this revolution thing before. We're out. And they take whatever money they can, they get out. The area actually around the Patronato, which was a Jewish neighborhood, is now home to many of the embassies. Those homes became embassies, actually. But most of the affluent Jews, for sure, and most of the Jews, period, picked up and left. Many of them ending up in centers of Jewish Cuban life in Los Angeles and Miami and some other places, where they established, or they reestablished themselves as Cuban Jewish communities outside of Cuba. But it was this experience of having lived through communism. They knew what was coming down the line, and this is not what they wanted to do, right? So they take their leave. So we can open it up for questions and comments and engage in a bit of a conversation. And if anybody online has a question, just unmute yourself and say something, and we'll hopefully include you.
Could you talk generally about the trip, the makeup of the trip, and what you're planning to do?
Yeah, so what we do is a combination of experiencing Havana itself. We're going to be staying in a resort hotel that is about 15 minutes or 10 minutes from the actual city center, that borders on, it's actually on the ocean. So it's not on the beach. There's no beach, but there's the ocean. And they have lovely pools and that kind of thing. But there isn't a beach per se, but there's a breakwater. And it's next, so we'll be staying in that area. And then we'll be visiting things that specifically pertain to both the Jewish community in general, but also Cuban history, in general Cuban history and general Cuban experiences. So things like, we'll do Friday night and Saturday morning at the synagogue. We'll meet with the members of the community there. We'll have some conversations with them. But we'll also be going to the Museum of the Revolution, which was in the governor's mansion, which is in the former governor's mansion, or the president's mansion in Havana. There'll be options to go to the art gallery, we'll have a tour of downtown Old Havana. We'll be going to the art district, where there's lots of both real art and folk art and all kinds of those sorts of things. It's a huge, massive sort of a warehouse kind of a building that is crammed with every kind of art that you can think about, both nice, fine art and also, the sort of touristy, kitschy, I went to Cuba and got a T-shirt that says Havana. We'll also take an opportunity at least once or twice to go to the beach, which is about 25 minutes down the road, and spend half a day or so enjoying the beach and the sun. The time of year that we're going, we're unlikely to have much in the way of rain or that kind of stuff. It doesn't rain much usually, so we should have great weather, and a great opportunity to also do a lot of the culture and the history. And Havana especially has unbelievable architecture. It's a the whole city is a World Heritage Site, and millions and millions are being poured into preservation and restoration of the architecture of Havana. And so we'll see, and there's been a massive change just in the last maybe 10, 15 years. The guides that we went with at first would always say, make sure you walk in the middle of the street, because you don't know when bits of a building might come down on. But that seems to have kind of resolved itself, and we don't really worry about that so much anymore. But we'll also go and see some of the real history of Havana, including things like the place where Christopher Columbus was buried or interned for about 400 years before the Spanish stole him and brought him back to Spain. Who knew, right? I had no idea. But yeah, that's, and he's there, he was there. Yeah, there will be lots of free time to kind of explore and do your own. I suspect that we'll probably do something like, so we'll do a tour of downtown Havana and then give people, some time to wander and explore. This is not a youth group trip, so I take no responsibility for any of you. Right? You're all big grown-ups and would like to explore different things, and that's fine. We'll also take advantage of some of the cultural stuff, like the music I was playing as you came in was from the Buena Vista Social Club, which was this amazing social club that was part of that interwar, from the end of the war into the time of the revolution. There were lots of amazing nightclubs and casinos, and there's a whole sort of sidebar Jewish story of, the Jewish mafia that was involved with in Havana and all of that. But there was this one sort of place called Buena Vista Social Club, which had the most amazing music, most amazing Cuban music. And probably about 15, maybe 20 years ago, they did a documentary on this, and they went and they found all of these older performers. And they found these older performers, and they continued to perform. So you have these amazing old school Latin, Cuban music performers who are now in their 80s and 90s and who do this amazing presentation. So we'll hopefully be able to do that one of the evenings.
Is it during Purim or no?
It is not during Purim.
So when's Purim?
Purim is actually would be the following week. Yeah, yeah.
How about credit cards and money?
Okay, so I mean, so it used to be that you couldn't come with American dollars, and these days, the hotel will basically exchange anything you like. So you can go to, there's these cash changers, and you can exchange money there. If you happen to have access to Canadian money, and you don't have to transfer it from American money to Canadian money, you can do that, because Canadian money is much easier to transfer there, because Canada has diplomatic relations with Cuba. Just a word. They do and they don't. I mean, if they have access to going overseas, yes. If they don't, then it's very difficult for them to maneuver. But American money is fine. I wouldn't worry about transferring money, because you lose every time you transfer money, right? So with American money, you'll actually get not a great exchange rate, but on the other hand, you're not going to lose, 'cause the cost of transferring it from American to Canadian to Cuban doesn't make sense. So, and it's just inconvenient, right? So although it's a few pennies here and there, we just transfer it at the hotel and call it a day. That being said, there are, in Cuba, there are still currently, although they're trying to get rid of it, two currency systems. There's the local Cuban currency, the peso, and then you have what is known as the CUC, which is the convertible peso, or the convertible currency, or basically the tourist currency. And it used to be that tourists were prohibited from using the convertible currency, and you had to use, the tourists had to use the convertible currency and not the peso. But now it's a little less whatever, but you do have to be careful when you're dealing with merchants or store owners, because if you give them a 10 convertible currency note, and they give you 5 pesos back, they've given you but 5 cents. Yeah, so they're not, the numbers don't exactly match up. Credit cards work, not everywhere, but most restaurants and larger stores have them. None of the merchants, like the street people or anything like that, and it is very much a cash-based kind of a thing. So you're much better off just taking cash. So it won't access your American funds. So you have to take whatever you're going to bring. Yeah. Yeah. But honestly, let me be honest, there's not all that much to buy. I mean, you're not buying jewelry, you're not buying diamonds, I mean, art is probably the most, kind of expensive.
And they bought a lot of art.
Right. Yeah, you can buy fantastic art.
Pieces they bought, but they sent them home.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they framed them. They didn't, they framed them here. But I don't know how many pieces they bought.
Did she use credit card, or did she have cash?
No, they had cash. But at that time, it was the tourist money, like the rabbi was talking about. They couldn't use anything else. They had to use the tourist money. But the art was, and because the Rolling Stones were there, they had these Rolling Stone posters and
And it's a beautiful, first of all, some of the art is fantastic, and it also supports the local economy in amazing ways, right? And I mean, they have nothing, so they make whatever they can, and they are incredibly talented. But beyond that, there's not really much to buy. I mean, so you need, money for food and this and whatever, but, yeah, all that kind of stuff, yeah. Yes, yes. Although you have to be careful. You are technically not so permitted to bring Cuban cigars into the United States, but whatever.
Yeah, you're allowed one box.
Well, you're allowed a box of cigars, not Cuban cigars, if they care. Of course, they're not going to look at my YouTube page and we're going to be toast, but there you are. Yeah, so and the other thing that they produce, which people love, is rum, and it's among the best rum ever. I mean, it's just amazing stuff, if you like rum. So, yes.
I wanted to ask you about the paladars, because when I was there about 8 years ago, we made sure we only ate at those places that were paladars, because if I recall, the other places are run by the government, and the money has to go back, so we had wonderful meals, we kept going back to the same place on the ocean, and it was down from the jazz place, the Cuban, the Buena Vista.
Yeah.
Place, we walked right down there, it was just wonderful, but I'm wondering about.
So over the last 10 years or so, they have opened up, and they have allowed people to operate their own small businesses. So a lot of little restaurants, a lot of mama cooking in the back kind of restaurants, those sorts of things. If you go to most of the larger places, like Ernest Hemingway's bar, which is this big touristy kind of attraction thing, that's a government-owned place, right? So many, to find those sort of little people. And probably what we'll end up doing, we have breakfast and lunch included at the hotel, but that may or may not, the dinners are, so, let me put it this way. They charge us $65 to add the dinner for all the nights. For the whole thing. For the whole thing. No, for all 6 nights, right? So you can imagine what you're, right. I would love to say we could stay at a fancier hotel, but there's almost nothing between super fancy and mediocre. So the hotels are all mediocre. We know they're mediocre, and that's not why we're there. Right? That's just part of the charm. Might be. Yeah. So I mean, there's the sort of basic stuff, right? It's not crazy, but yes. Don't expect luxury and foofiness.
What's the name of the resort?
Be Live Havana Copacabana or something like that. Belive. Be Live. Yeah. That's the place.
I remember when we were going through the town, ladies, there were no toilet seats.
Correct.
No toilet seats. So
There's several things.
some people had money that they brought it back from the States and they brought them back for the family. That was a luxury because there was so little food and everything else was such a struggle.
Yeah. I don't quite know why there's no toilet seats, but that exists. Yeah, no, for sure. And this is not what you need to know about the trip sort of meeting, which we'll get to, later. We're not going till March, so I don't want to, whatever. But you always carry your own toilet paper and your own toilet seat, and you pay to use a restroom in a facility. Like you have to give them $1 or whatever, You know those airplane pillows? You could just. Yes. Yeah, they don't have those. Those are the Turkish toilets. No, no, no. They don't have those, but it's a regular toilet, but it has no toilet seat. There's no seats. Most places have no seats. Your hotel will have a seat. Your hotel will definitely have a seat. But even like a nice restaurants and whatever, there's no seat. And no soap. I speak English. So we have, right, so mostly it's Spanish, right? It's a Spanish-speaking country for sure. Most of the tourist areas speak English, and I think we have at least one person coming on the trip who's fluent in Spanish. Not me. Yeah, so, other questions?
When my sisters went and Jackie, they talked about, you were talking about the taxi driver who's also the doctor. So their guide was a doctor.
Yeah.
And they could not believe that he made like no money as a doctor. Because this one woman that was on the trip with him, her husband's a doctor. And she was like, that's impossible. You can't just make like $60 a month as a doctor. She just couldn't understand that. And in order to survive, he was a taxi driver.
Now recognizes he makes $60 a month as a doctor and he makes $400 a day as a taxi driver.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, the government stopped all doctors from becoming anything related to tourism industry. Because they were losing their they were losing their doctors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, Cuba actually just, two other things. One, Cuba has an amazing education system. They have an unbelievable educational system, and they have a great, medical training program. You have fantastic doctors. The problem is access to the medicines, but that's a whole other issue. And secondly, Cuba is incredibly safe. Unlike lots of other Caribbean, that sort of area countries, Cuba is very, very safe. There is a... Nobody has a gun except the police. Nobody. Just nobody. And there are, amazingly stiff penalties for any sort of violent whatever. And remember, the only industry they have is essentially tourism. So they're very, very strict with any of these issues and whatever. Now, that's not to say that there isn't, there's lots of people around the city who are asking you if you'd like a tour, if you'd like a thing, if you want to go here, can I help you find something over here? And then they, want a handout. But beyond that, it's a very, very safe place. We wandered around, whatever, and we never had any issues. And it's just been an amazingly safe place. Sorry? I don't know. I assume, but that I don't know. Yeah. So the other thing that we'll be doing is we'll be going to a place called Hershey. Hershey is the botanical gardens built by the Hershey Company for their employees, which was sort of a place that employees could go in this little town outside about 20 minutes outside Havana. And it is this beautiful botanical gardens with the most amazing restaurant and mama cooking in the back and the whole thing. And it's just like an oasis. It's unbelievable. And there are 2 ways to get there. One is really fun, but takes a long time, which is so when Hershey built it, they also had to figure out a way to get the sugar from the plantation, which was in this little town named Hershey, from there to the port in Havana. And so they built a small electric railroad. And that electric railroad now is used as a commuter rail. And it takes about an hour and a half. It's an hour and a half train ride and then about a 2-kilometer walk, sort of a mile and a half or so, to get from the train station to the park. So I don't know if we're quite up to that, but otherwise we can just take a regular taxi transit. It's only 20 minutes. But the opportunity is that you can really get to sort of be with the locals, and you can see the countryside go by. It's really quite fascinating. But we'll get a chance to sort of get out of the city that way, and sort of take a look at what it's like outside Havana, as well as you actually don't fly into Havana. You fly into a place called Veradero, which is kind of more the resort area. And then it's an hour and a half or an hour and 3/4 bus ride from Veradero to Havana. And so we'll, on the way back to the airport, we'll be able to see things, because on the way there, it'll be night. So, okay, and I think our time is just, oh, well, just about up. Okay, Rochelle. Roswell Park has a long-standing joint clinical research study in Cuba with their medical research community. So maybe we can get hooked up to see if there's anything that we can do with that. Thank you, Rochelle. Okay. Anything else? Great. I want to thank you all.
Thank you.
And again, if you're interested, let me know, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Everybody online, thank you for joining us. There's some snacks and stuff. You can help yourself.
Didn't matter to me. see,